This is not normal, y'all. I've never seen a game marketed like Highguard or, completely lack in marketing, especially this coming from a brand new studio and an IP that has still yet to prove itself. And I've already talked about Highguard before, but it feels like as we get closer and closer to launch, the situation surrounding this just feels worse and worse. Now, Highguard, for those who don't know, was announced back at the Game Awards 2025, and it has not been met with a whole lot of fanfare. And that has in large part to do with the fact that it was announced as like the big showstopper at the Game Awards. It was the big finale, and that slot is usually reserved for something that is a lot more established, that generates a lot more hype, rather than something that is brand new from an unknown studio and a game that is yet another, hero shooter that is something that a lot of people feel a little fatigue over given how many live services there are out there right now. Now, this game does come from developers who worked on Titanfall and Apex Legends, and that's how Jeff Keighley tried to hype it up. But that's not enough on its own to make Highguard the big finale and justify that, especially because the game does not really resemble what people really want out of such developers, which is a spiritual successor to Titanfall, a series that has long remained dormant and done so for far too long. And so the disappointment in the way it was announced as the big finale and that it ultimately turned out to be yet another hero shooter, and it almost resembles Concord in the way the reception has been so negative and the lack of interest. It's all generating a narrative that Highguard just doesn't feel like it's primed to be a massive success. And one of the things that people highlight is that the game comes out on January 26th, 2026, which is very soon. And since the game's announcement, it's gone radio silent. We've not seen a single post from the Highguard developers since its announcement, to the point where people took notice of this. 3 weeks prior to its launch on January 6, 2026, Jake Lucky here highlighted how the game launches in less than 3 weeks, and there's been no post on social media, despite likely having paid a lot of money to debut their game at the Game Awards, and especially at that coveted slot of, the big finale. And then 2 weeks prior to launch on January 12, 2026, Dexerto made it a point to highlight that Highguard haven't posted on social media since the reveal trailer at the Game Awards. The game is set to release in 2 weeks. And this is something that has been prominently brought up by numerous media outlets, because this is really abnormal for a game to market itself like this, which is with no marketing at all. There has to be an extreme level of confidence to not engage in marketing so shortly before your game's release. And then that brings us to more recently on January 19th, 2026, people highlighted that despite the game now being only 1 week away from launch, there's been zero social media posts. And you can check this yourself. If you go to Highguard's Twitter page right now, you'll find that its most recent post was from December 11th, 2025, which was the announcement trailer for the game. If you go to Highguard's YouTube channel, you'll find that if you check out their videos, it's just the official reveal trailer, not a single additional bit of content, not a single additional bit of information about the game. Like, there's no big gameplay overview trailer to try to highlight some of the more, potentially unique aspects of Highguard as a hero shooter. They're relying on the official reveal trailer that has been so negatively received to carry the whole marketing of the game. And I don't know how that's going to fly. Even on their official website, all we'll find is this countdown right here, 8 days until launch. That's as of the recording of this video, just a little over a week before its release, but no updates on the website providing additional information to try to get people hyped for a game that they're very skeptical about. And then this whole situation surrounding Highguard gets even worse when you realize how easily this could have potentially been prevented, or at the very least, the damage been mitigated. There's a general belief right now that it was the Highguard developers who decided to pay top bill to be featured as the big finale of the Game Awards 2025. And we have seen reports before that it can cost quite a bit to feature your game trailer at the Game Awards. So, for example, right here, a game developer article highlighted a report from Kotaku stating that the Game Awards trailers can cost developers up to $1 million to be featured. A 60-second trailer can reportedly cost up to $450,000, with a 3-minute trailer costing over $1 million. With Highguard's reveal from the trailer to Jeff Keighley's announcement being closer to a little over 4 minutes, people imagine that the Highguard developers paid a couple millions to get that slot. But as it turns out, this decision didn't originate from the Highguard developers. It was actually an offer that was made to them. That's at least based on a report by Paul Tassi from Forbes, who tweeted the following recently, quote, "Have learned that Highguard did not actually pay for the Game Awards finale slot. Was just the show putting it there. It was just Jeff Keighley who decided that, he wants to feature this game as the finale." Paul Tassi apparently heard this from multiple sources. In his article, he said that 2 separate sources have told me that Highguard did not have to pay for that hugely coveted spot at all. Reportedly, showrunner Jeff Keighley just really liked the game and offered it to them. And furthermore, he's not the only individual who's heard this. Imran Khan, who's also a games journalist, apparently heard that Highguard didn't need to pay for the spot. And this is essentially Paul Tassi corroborating Imran Khan's report, who kind of reported on this first. Now, I would imagine that this was something that Jeff Keighley discussed with the developers, and the developers were thrilled to get such a coveted slot for free. But the origin of Highguard being featured as the big finale was seemingly, the Game Awards, or, Jeff Keighley, who gets to have a big say in how things are presented during that awards ceremony and that showcase. There are other rumors and reports floating around, like this individual saying, "I've heard it was not the original plan to feature Highguard as the big finale. The original game got delayed and they didn't put it up. So Jeff asked them if they wanted the final slot, and they said yes." So yeah, Jeff thought they were good enough to put last, but still left the decision up to them. And, that to me does make sense. I'm not sure how accurate such reports are, but that sounds about how things would play out. But I think in Jeff Keighley making that offer, it ultimately doomed the marketing of Highguard. Because sure, a lot of people laid eyes on Highguard, but what it turned into ultimately was mass ridicule online rather than something that people really became highly anticipant about. There's this saying that goes, there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I would argue that is absolutely not true, especially in the realm of gaming. Gaming takes up so much of people's time and, with monetization money that they can only dedicate to so many experiences. And so, yeah, bad publicity for a live service that will ask you to dedicate dozens upon dozens of hours throughout the course of, days, weeks, months, maybe even years, can be lethal for a live service. And we have seen this happen time and time again with all of the live services that ultimately ended up flopping and shutting down and disappeared from the face of the earth. Like, it requires a special level of oh, wow, that looks really cool, for people to detach themselves from the live service that they already play to engage with this new one. And that reveal trailer, unfortunately, just didn't do a good job at that, and it being saved for the final slot raised expectations sky high, and this trailer never had a chance to meet that expectation because nobody knows what Highguard is. It's a brand new IP. Yes, it was made by Titanfall developers and Apex Legends developers, but this game doesn't resemble what people love from those developers. And it happens to be a genre that people have fatigue over, that has not generally been received well, with this kind of having a similar marketing cycle to Concord, to the point where people are literally calling this Concord 2. So yeah, plenty of people are expressing bafflement online, saying Jeff Keighley honestly thought that was the best spot. And that goes doubly true when you consider that Highguard could have been placed earlier in the show, and one of the previous announcements would have made for a much better big finale, like Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic, or, Control Resonant, whatever. Any one of those more well-known IPs and studios could have made for a big finale that is worthy of that spot, that, potentially meets people's expectations of what that big finale should be. And many people are in agreement, which is why we're seeing comments like Jeff turning Highguard from a quiet flop to a nuclear disaster is so funny to me, like pointing to someone in the crowd who pissed themselves. This garnered tons of views and likes. Someone down here is also talking about how there were so many other announcements that came before Highguard that they could have swapped places with, and it would have made for a much better big finale, a much better overall show, and it would have allowed Highguard to not be lambasted for taking up the big finale spot and not living up to that hype. I feel like if that's how things would have taken place, then Highguard would have been given a bit more benefit of the doubt, though I still think there would have been a general sense of disappointment of, oh, this is a game from the devs who worked on Titanfall, only to get a hero shooter that, don't get me wrong, gameplay wise, it does look sleek. It's got mobility and it's got shooting mechanics that, are resemblant of something like Titanfall, but it's not in line with what people expect out of an experience from these developers, which is something Titanfall-like. This is just not that at all. Instead, it's something a little more generic, a little more like in line with what live service trends tend to lean towards. It's just another hero shooter. And for you to promote yet another one of those, you really have to stand out. And that trailer ultimately did not. So yeah, for a game that mishandled its marketing so, epically, people are wondering, how are they going to proceed to market this game? Are they going to just kind of stay quiet and then let the game speak for itself when it launches and risk that ultimately nobody will really check it out because nobody will know that the game has launched due to a lack of marketing? Or are they planning to do marketing like at the very last minute? The latter might be a potential given what Tom Henderson from Insider Gaming tweeted here, saying you can really tell who got invited to the Highguard event and who didn't with all it takes about its marketing. Now, I don't know if Tom Henderson is saying that in jest or if he's heard from sources that there is, in fact, some kind of Highguard event ongoing that's private, that is secretive, that, had a couple media outlets and influencers come in, sign an NDA, and only talk about it much closer to launch. But yeah, apparently outlets like Forbes and people like Paul Tassi have not been invited. He doesn't seem particularly broken up about it, saying, oh no, not my Highguard event invite. But yeah, I don't know. There's just not been a whole lot of buzz about the potential of a Highguard event. So who knows? Maybe, everyone's just adhering to, the signed NDA. Or, maybe there's no event at all. But I don't know. For me, I feel like they do have to do some marketing that there would be some kind of Highguard event so close to launch. So I feel like there might be some validity to Tom Henderson's claims here. And if that is indeed the case, then Highguard's entire fate is riding on the feedback of that event. If that is something that is happening, if the feedback from people who've played the game at this alleged event isn't overwhelmingly positive, Highguard is going to be dead on arrival with the kind of lack of interest and negative optics that the game is currently facing. And so this is a very risky proposition, what they're doing here. This kind of marketing tactic, it feels like they're trying to replicate what they did with Apex Legends, where they literally shadow dropped it, didn't have a whole lot of marketing for it, and then people got to check it out and, do some early coverage for it and stream it and all these things. And it did end up blowing up. But Apex Legends did come at a time when Battle Royale was a very popular genre, and that was a big thing, and people were curious about this new one and how it differentiates itself from the others, and the fact that it did come from EA and Titanfall developers, that it came from Respawn, bolstered it because that's a known studio. Highguard is not quite in that same position to be able to pull something like that and expect similar results. Sure, it is from Titanfall devs, but the development studio is brand new. And then the genre that it's currently tackling is not at the level of popularity that, say, like Battle Royales were when Apex Legends launched. Hero shooters are not quite the big thing that it once used to be. It's still pretty big, but it is also now very saturated. And so anything short of overwhelmingly positive feedback surrounding Highguard will ultimately yield in Highguard not being interesting enough to the masses and not being a curiosity and not being enough of a curiosity for people to check this game out. Though who knows, maybe we'll start seeing rollout of marketing just like a day or two before the game's launch that will potentially convince people that there's more to Highguard than the trailer showed and then meets the eye. Maybe they will show some things that will kind of impress us, that will make us curious enough to check this game out, and maybe that will lead to a snowball effect of people eventually coming to Highguard and giving it a chance and maybe having more fun than they thought they would with this title. But right now, everything is really disconcerting when it comes to the narrative surrounding Highguard, when it comes to the lack of marketing surrounding Highguard, and the fact that the only marketing we've gotten from Highguard since its announcement is the Game Awards posting this just 1 week until the release of Highguard. The Game Awards is doing all the marketing for Highguard, and Highguard itself has done none of it. I mean, it's a bold strategy if they're confident that just kind of dropping this without a whole lot of marketing and only marketing it a day or two before launch and relying on impressions from events will be enough to make this free-to-play title a successful enough live service that it can financially be maintained, that it will allow for enough engagement from players for monetization to flow at a large enough scale that it allows for this free-to-play live service to make its money back and then some. But I think this is the wrong way to go about promoting a game that is this brand new, that is this unknown, that comes from such an unknown studio, and that garners such negative reception when it was first announced. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen. only time will tell. I do wish the game well. I hope it surprises us. I hope it's a lot better than people think it is right now. But they need to show that, and they're just not. And to me, this close to launch, very disconcerting. I don't know that this marketing strategy will end up working out, but maybe the game is so exceptional and they're so confident that the developers that they don't feel the need to market the game more than they intend to much closer to launch. But we'll find out how all of this pans out. But that's one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on everything surrounding Highguard right now in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.